All right, what is up, guys? Welcome back, my fellow nerds and gangsters. So, this is a special on-the-road interview with all one viewer right now. Who's watching? Comment so I know. We're on the road. We're driving home from Lucasfilm. I'm with a very, very special guest. His name is Joe Campana. He is an animation editor. He is a Disney and Star Wars historian. So he is awesome, an absolute wealth of knowledge. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time if we ever get laggy. We're in the car just going off, 4G, so I hope it works great. So Joe, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us just briefly about, what you do, how you got to become a Disney and Star Wars historian. And then we'll start asking some sweet questions from you guys, and we got a few questions planned ourselves.
Well, I started, from my childhood, I was interested in animation and had hopes of getting into animation somehow as a career.
And we're talking, the hand-drawn 2D animation.
Yes.
Old school animation. That's really hard.
And we had the few books that there were at the time in the house, and I learned what I could then, but mostly I got interested through trips to Disneyland and such. But I did get in the film business 29 years ago next month, and I started off in sound editing. By the way, I apologize for not looking into the camera because
he's driving.
I am driving.
And we want to live.
And so I got into the film business, and I was working in sound editorial at a post house outside of the studios. But we did work for Warner Brothers TV. We did a couple of feature films a year. We did a lot of movies of the week. And I did that for 2.5, 3 years. And then I got an opportunity. One of the editors I worked with was going to leave to go work on a new animated feature film at a small studio in Burbank. So he says, why don't you come with me? You'd like to do this, right? And I said, yeah. So I joined him and this crew of what would be about 300 people doing a hand-drawn animated film. And that was in September of 93. And the film came out in November of 94. And in that time, I got a whole bunch of, made a lot of animation friends, folks who, a lot of them were animators, and I started asking around about how animators worked back in the classic days, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s.
So the Snow Whites, Pinocchio, Peter Pan days.
Up through Peter Pan and Dalmatians and all that. And I started hearing some stories, and there were some of the folks that I worked with who were rather old or knew a lot of the old timers, and there were still a few around. Again, this was early 90s, so there were still a few around. And so I heard some of the stories, and I got more interested in really how it all worked. Of course, I'm not much of an artist. I can barely draw a decent Mickey Mouse. And but I loved the stories, and I loved hearing about these people and certain aspects of their lives. So beyond that, I got involved in ASIFA Hollywood.
Now, what is ASIFA?
It's the International Animated Film Society.
It's a historian group, correct?
Probably, yeah, you could say that. But it's interested in preserving, but also dealing with. They put on the Annie Awards every year.
The Annie Awards are like the animation awards. It's like the Oscars for animated content.
And I knew through other historical stuff I was interested in, I got to know one of the people who was the leader of the ASIFA. I think he may not have been president, might have been vice president, but that was Tom Cito.
And Tom Cito he is a renowned storyboard artist. He was head of story on Lion King. What else?
No, he was head of story on Pocahontas.
Pocahontas. He did boarding for Lion King.
And lots of other things. I got to know him a little bit when I worked at DreamWorks after the film I had worked on. He was.
You were on Prince of Egypt in DreamWorks, right?
I didn't work. I worked on it later.
Later.
I did some screenings. I worked in kind of a peripheral to editorial editing. I took the film to different venues to show for promotional purposes and to get clearances from church groups and whatnot. So there was a lot of people we needed to please with that film. So
and just so you know why, Prince of Egypt was a huge deal for DreamWorks because it was their first animated feature film, and so it had to be successful.
And that was for obviously Jeffrey Katzenberg, who had headed up the animation division of Disney in its renaissance in the late 80s, early 90s.
So that's like The Little Mermaid, The Lion King, the Pocahontas, I guess, right?
Yep. He did greenlight Pocahontas, but he left
shortly before, right?
Shortly after Lion King,
Yeah.
After Lion King came out.
So he was a big reason Disney kind of got back into their heyday. So let's shift gears to Disney.
Okay.
So the big headline of and we are going to talk about Lucasfilm, guys, because I know you guys are anxious to hear about that. Let's see here. So Red Hood 23 says Prince of Egypt is a masterpiece. I don't care what anybody says. I really like the film too.
It really is, and I saw at that time, because I was doing these screenings, I saw it more than most people, and I would almost argue I saw it more than some of the folks who produced it. Because when I did a screening, I had to sit through the film once for a tech run through, and then I would sit through the film again with whoever we were screening it for. And the summer of '98, I believe it was, I saw that film 60 times probably.
60 times, wow. You're like one of the, when you're 3 years old and you just watch a movie again and again and again.
That's what I felt like, yeah. I felt like a 3-year-old.
Okay, so let's talk Disney though.
Let's go Disney.
He knows more about Disney than most of the world. So the title of this podcast is Would Walt Have Bought Lucasfilm? And Lucasfilm, of course, owns Star Wars, Indiana Jones. Those are their two biggest properties, but then a variety of other small things. Of course, they own Skywalker Sound, Industrial Light and Magic, which does visual effects. And so, would Walt Disney, if he were still alive, as you guys know, he died in 68? 66. December 15th, 1966. If he were still alive, would Walt have bought Lucasfilm?
I think so. You have to take into account Walt died when the company was on a big upswing, although once he died, there was many years spent wondering how to move forward. And the one primary thing they moved forward on was theme parks, which 5 years after Walt passed away, nearly 5 years after Walt passed away, they opened Walt Disney World in Florida.
Speak up just a little bit.
And when and Walt's brother Roy, who was 7-8 years older than him, vowed to Walt to make sure that Walt Disney World got done. So that became his thing. He spent the next 5 years doing that. He opened the park in October, I believe, maybe September of '71.
This was Walt Disney World open.
This is Walt Disney World, the
Florida.
Magic Kingdom,
Okay.
yes. And then Roy passed away 2 months later. So he got his job done, and then he passed away. But he got that park open, and it became a colossus of tourism and happy mirth that it is today. But
the cash cow that it is today.
I think it's a tourist spot.
A tourist spot, yes. That's how Disney puts it.
It's Vacationland USA.
Where you can spend a lot of money.
Yes. But I think Walt would have bought Lucasfilm as a matter of diversification. And he couldn't probably have contemplated the amount of money that it would have cost. It
was a steal when you really think about it.
It was in comparison to other things that Disney has.
Like how much was Pixar? Pixar was $6 billion, right?
6.7, I think.
And then Lucasfilm was 4.2 or something like
Yeah, I don't know numbers right off the top. It's been a long weekend, and it's only Saturday morning.
Yeah.
But I think he would, knowing the value of the properties that Lucasfilm owns, and especially with things moving ahead. Walt was always looking ahead. Disney and Bob Iger have been looking ahead for quite a long time too. They knew they were going to be doing a streaming service for the last few years anyway, and possibly longer than that. Iger's no dummy.
No, not at all.
And they knew they were going to need product, and in particular franchise product. So it was a great move, and Walt was always making smart moves with quality in mind, and I think that fits into exactly what Walt would have done. He was always interested in that and owning things. He learned from his youth or young business that he could have things taken away from him, much as the Oswald character had been taken away.
So Oswald, for you guys who don't know, Oswald the Rabbit was the precursor to Mickey Mouse. And now, just in like a sentence, he designed Oswald, but he didn't own the rights to it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
They after Walt did his series of Girl in an Animated World shorts back in the 20s, early 20s, that was the Alice comedies. They went in to do a full animated shorts with a character named Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and it was distributed by, it was done for Universal through a deal with his original distributor, who was Margaret Winkler, but she had become married to Charles Mintz, and by the time she bowed out, they were into the Oswald product, putting out film every
month.
It was on a pretty good schedule. Maybe it might have been every 2 weeks. Gosh, okay, I'm not remembering that either. I'd have to dig into it. Anyway, so they had this property, Oswald, and then Mintz realized he might be able to do it himself, because he was running a studio in New York with a lot of really talented animators, and he moved some of them out to California. He also took away some of Walt's people when they killed the contract for Walt to produce more Oswalds, because Walt wanted a little bit more money, because they were barely eking by, and Walt was always interested in...
Was this him and Roy?
Walt and Roy, but Walt was always interested in putting more quality into it, which he always had arguments with Roy about how much they had to spend on things. Walt pushed for quality, and wanted a little bit more money from the distributor, and they weren't willing to do that.
So they took the property themselves.
So they said, so Charlie Mintz said, okay, I think we can do this ourselves. Okay.
All right, we dropped out first, guys. We're back.
And so Walt came up with Mickey Mouse in the March. Are we still there?
Yeah, I'm just saying.
March
Red Hood 23 says, I think we could do this ourselves. Famous last words before a property goes downhill. So Oswald, so they tried it, and then Mickey Mouse came out, and Mickey Mouse killed Oswald?
Oh, Mickey Mouse was a sensation.
Okay.
Oswald, needless to say, the films that Vince produced through his brother-in-law, George Winkler, at the studio, were not up to the quality of what Walt had done. And what was funny was they actually had the character taken from them after a year or thereabouts by one of the people who was working there named Walter Lantz.
So I got a question. So isn't Charles Muntz the character in Up, the Explorer?
Mintz. This is Charles
Mintz.
Mintz.
But isn't that the character in Up? Isn't his name Charles Muntz?
Yes.
Is that a coincidence that they that it's that close?
I don't know. They have said that. I will check with the director of Up and ask him.
Which he knows, and who is himself a Disney historian and Disney freak. Real quick, somebody asked here regarding Disney or Walt and George Lucas. So Titanium Ranger asked, would Mr. Disney had wanted George Lucas to stay on as a writer and consultant? And that's assuming that George would have wanted to
himself. Yeah.
So, what do you think?
I don't know. Walt always had a keen eye for talent, writing talent, directing talent, and probably would have, because it was his properties. I think he probably would have kept George. This is all kind of fluffy discussion, because it would never have happened that way anyway. But yeah, I imagine so. Walt could see talent in people that those individuals didn't even know they had.
And that's really what made him such a good...
That was one of the genius sides of Mr. Disney, was that he could see things that people didn't know they could do. And he would give them tasks, put them into new job and positions where he knew they'd work out, and they wound up flourishing. Like when WED got created to start working on the theme parks, he grabbed a few of his animators and brought them over there, and background painters and other artists that had worked for him for years. But Walt generally saw things in people and knew how to put that to work for his much larger plans. And
so he probably would have seen that in George.
He would have seen something, and maybe George wouldn't have been a writer. Maybe George would just... George is a very good producer too, so maybe they have moved him into
creative producer, right?
A producing role, yeah. But I think, he probably would have kept George on if George, like we said, wanted to stay.
Yeah. So somebody says, Red Hood 23 says, Mickey Mouse kills Oswald needs to be a movie. That kills story. Oswald. The story of Mickey Mouse killing Oswald the Rabbit. Not murdering, but killing the property.
It should be. Some people have tackled that story, even on YouTube. I think there's stories out there, but I haven't seen them recently, but I recall they are full of factual and temporal errors. So
most historical pieces, I suppose.
I would be careful with some of that stuff.
If you guys have any questions, please let us know.
There have been a few good books written about it. It's an interesting story, because at the Winkler studio that Mintz pretty much owned, that was his first step in the West Coast. He ultimately moved out here in 1930, bringing his entire staff, and they continued doing animation, and then started doing a little character called Scrappy, a little boy character, and other properties. They did Crazy Cat, things like that.
So let's talk now. Let's shift gears a little bit to Star Wars.
Star Wars.
So the original Star Wars was filmed mostly in London at Pinewood Studios, and then in Tunisia for the Tatooine scenes. But there were also a bunch of portions filmed in California.
Yes.
And you have personally gone out and found a lot of these portions.
I've even found the ones that nobody knew about.
That even Lucasfilm didn't know about.
Nobody there remembered anyway where they shot some of the stuff.
So what are some of these scenes, and how did they just cut so seamlessly?
Primarily, the characters were shot at Pinewood and in Tunisia, and then
Pinewood is Pinewood Studios. It's a network of sound stages in London or in England.
And after the principal photography got wrapped, they were working on visual effects, and all the visual effects shots were done here in California. Most were done on what became not even a soundstage, just the effects shop, the Industrial Light and Magic, the original incarnation of Industrial Light and Magic, run by John Dykstra, and with cameraman Richard Edlund, Dennis Murin, and folks you know, names you know. And so all of those shots were done here. There were a few shots that they were tasked to do, which were miniature shots and the land speeder shots that were shot in the desert north of LA. And they also did the cantina, some of the cantina shots with the just critters popping up into frame, and additional critters for the cantina were shot down in Hollywood.
I didn't know that.
At a small soundstage. And I had the address. I think it's either on La Brea or just one over from La Brea in Hollywood. And those were done in one day, just a pickup series of shots. And I assume, I'm not totally sure that the crew on that was probably from ILM. But Rick Baker was involved in that, in creating some of the characters, and I think he also played a character or two.
Cool. So somebody just asked real quick, any thoughts on the Mandalorian and how they will return to use ship models? We were actually being told a lot about that when we were at Lucasfilm. I don't know if he told us anything that hasn't been public, though.
I don't know if we can say anything.
I mean, we do know they're using models. Announced.
I don't know if we can go beyond that.
I don't know if we can go beyond that. But I mean, just in general, though, using models, I'm pretty excited about it.
I love practical effects.
Yeah.
I'm a nut for practical effects.
I think it adds a sense of realism, that you don't even get with CG. However, CG has come quite a long way. I mean, the Rogue One space battle is fantastic.
Yeah. Whatever tells the story best.
Yeah, it's whatever tells the story best. But we're excited about it, though.
Yep, very excited. Mandalorian, I think that's going to be quite a show.
Yeah, it's going to be sweet. Hello there, Red Comic. Let's see here. Dale Erdman asked, would it have been better? Would Star Wars, I assume you're asking, would Star Wars have been better if George was kept on? Like the new incarnation? It's kind of hard to say.
That...
It would have been different, but would it have been better? I don't know.
Personally, I don't know. It would have been different, better, hard to say, because George wants to go. In fact, we had a very long discussion with a friend who is in the know, let's say, last night. We had a long dinner with a lot.
Talked a lot about this, yeah.
A lot of discussion, some related to George and story and storytelling, and it's a tough call because George has has had very firm ideas about the stories that he likes to tell and how they should be told and the structure of them. It's a hard call. And how do you judge better? Would it sell more tickets in the theater? Would it sell more DVDs and Blu-rays? Or would it just make the fans happier?
Yeah.
I don't know. Better can be judged many different ways as well.
Yeah, there's a big discussion right now on whether or not that Star Wars should delve more into discussing the history of the Force or the intricacies of the Force or maintaining it as a mystery. I mean, yeah. I think George, if we were around, he probably would have delved more into the Force. I mean, he kind of tried to with the midichlorians, and rumor is that the new sequel, his sequel trilogy, would have delved even further into it. But, so another question here is, let's see here. Somebody says there would have been a lot of green screen, probably. Let's see here. Somebody asked, did they shoot Marvel at Pinewood Studios as well? Yeah, they shoot a lot of Marvel films. There's also a Pinewood Studios in Atlanta that's been there for...
Hold on. There's a Pinewood in Australia as well.
Yeah, I think there is, yeah. Let's see here.
Are they seeing your finger scrolling through this?
No. I think we're here though. I'm scrolling through your questions, guys. So we're coming up. We're going to end this in about 5 minutes, just so you guys know. But so let's talk about the trip to Lucasfilm. So
Talk away.
Joe here.
It was an early morning.
It was
very early morning yesterday.
We left LA at like 5 a.m. Drove all the way up there for an 11:30 meeting. We met with a few folks there. Talked, of course, about the fan film a bit. They expressed that they enjoyed it, that they loved how it was, George kind of in with George's vision, and how it was clear it was trying to, build upon the franchise and the characters, not change things or tear it down, just build upon it and make it more, make the characters more readily relatable as characters. They liked how Darth Vader was made the man behind the mask, not just the villain in the mask. Because that's, one of the things that they said is, George, when he made the original trilogy, he didn't intend for Darth Vader to be such a maskless villain, even though he was wearing a mask. And that's why he made the prequel trilogy, so that we could know the man behind the mask, and they liked the fan film because of that. Beyond that, can't really say too much. However,
It was a good day.
it was a great, and then they gave us a tour as well, and they showed us
the Lucasfilm Villa.
Yeah.
It's at this large complex on the Presidio,
right next to the Golden Gate Bridge.
and we got to see the Lucasfilm building as well as the Industrial Light and Magic building, which is kind of behind it. And I had a tour there before. This was a first for Danny, and it's something else. It's quite a nice, great space, and the stuff they have to show is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they got props from the movies, so I posted a few pictures on my Instagram yesterday. Those are actual, screen-used props, like the prop of...
Some are.
Yeah, some of them.
Not all that we saw. Some of
the broken lightsaber, from Episode 8, that was used on set. The mask of Finn with the the bloody marks, that was actually worn by John Boyega. The Sabbat cars were the actual cars used by the actors in Solo. And then a variety of other things. I did ask, there's the the necklace that Luke Skywalker has in his hut with the red kyber crystal. They have that one. And I did ask, is that the kyber crystal? Is that Vader's kyber crystal? And all they did was, That's all they did. They didn't tell us. So I tried, guys.
A blank stare.
And I did ask questions, if Anakin is going to be a 9, and I asked if Sidious was going to have the high ground. I joked about that.
No, the people who we were around don't even know.
But they didn't even know. So they were just kind of fun questions to ask. But we knew they didn't know, and of course, if they did know, they weren't going to tell us. But
I don't think they know.
Yeah, but they didn't know even.
That stuff's kept.
I think he knew a little bit more, but I don't know. Who knows? But long story short, I didn't get any good nuggets for you guys, and even if I did, I probably couldn't even say. But it's fascinating that place. There's, what did he say? Anywhere from 800 to 1,200 employees working there at any given time. More when there's a film going on, so there's more employees right now. But and I told him, I'm like, guys, my career goal is to direct a Star Wars film, and
you did already.
Well, a real Star Wars film. Oh,
okay. One where you get paid.
One where it's canon. So I did tell him that, but they enjoyed the film, and they are looking forward to episode 2.
And then where'd we go?
And then we went to the Walt Disney Museum. That's right there as well. The Walt Disney Family Museum. And learned a lot about the history of Walt Disney and his, from his childhood through the Disney days, which is a really cool museum. If you're ever up there, I'd recommend checking it out. And of course, checking out Lucasfilm as well.
Like, it's not really. They don't really offer tours at Lucasfilm.
Oh, maybe they don't. Yeah.
You got to know people.
You got to know people.
You can drive past it.
You got to be invited.
You can get your picture taken with the Yoda.
All right, guys, we are pulling up to our destination, so we gotta make like a baby and head out. Thanks very much. I did learn a few nuggets though that I'm gonna make some videos on, that I can share that wouldn't.
What did you learn?
The music thing.
Oh. I didn't so much learn that. Okay.
That's really, really cool. Shows how much George knew everything in episode 1. So definitely keep an eye out for that. You guys are gonna love it. I'll probably make it for Wednesday's video that'll drop at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So definitely, you guys are gonna love it. It's gonna blow your minds because it blew my mind. It's something that I had never heard before. It's something they did a panel on at Celebration, but it was not streamed. And so you got to kind of be directed to where the info is, and the guy's hooking us up. So I definitely keep an eye out for that. I'm going to do, he just bought a really sweet Star Wars archive book, so I might do a video about a review of that. We can take a look at it.
I do have to bring it in.
You do have to bring it because it's going to be the coolest. And so it'll be cool. But thanks so much, guys. You guys are awesome, all 11 of you, and thanks, Joe, very much for.
We can do more of this later.
We can do more. We can do more. Joe's a wealth of knowledge. If you have any questions for him, be sure to let me know, because he knows pretty much everything about everything when it comes to Disney, Disney and Star Wars. So, but thanks again, guys. Remember to stay spiffy and don't do anything we wouldn't do twice.